for questions and answers. We want to make sure of that and give everybody an opportunity. But if you'd rather submit the question in writing, you can fill it out and put the young ladies up front, and we'll collect those and make sure that we address everybody's questions. All right, we'll get going. We'll call the meeting to order. We don't want to hold anybody up here too late tonight, but we thank you all for coming. We appreciate this a lot. We hope you learn information from tonight's meeting. That's our main goal, is to answer questions, to let you know why Plattsburgh Citizens Coalition has been formed, what our purpose and goals are. The agenda, I think you all had an opportunity to pick up the agenda. We'll follow it to some extent. The main thing here, we want everybody to know that this is intended to be a somewhat informal session here. We are hoping to engage everyone that's here, to have you ask questions, and we will do our best to present answers to those questions. We'll give you some initial information from our speakers, and then, as I say, we'll open it up to questions. And one thing I do want everyone to be aware of, this is not intended to be a debate about the project known as Prime Development on Turkey Street. We're here to share with you the information that we've gathered, and as I said, the goals of the Plattsburgh Citizens Coalition. So I'm just going to take a moment and just get everybody a brief background, a broad overview of the history of the DRI, the Downtown Revitalization Initiative, which began back as early as 2015. There was work being done by the city's Community Development Office. There were RFPs issued at that time for a feasibility study for the downtown area. There was a real estate market analysis and a financial feasibility study done by a consultant group that ran through early 2016. In May of 2016, there was an actual application submitted to the North Country Regional Economic Development I don't want to say corporation, committee, actually, the North Country Red Sea, as you may all be familiar with that term. They're the funding representative for state awards of state funds and so forth. In November of 2016, Mayor Reed was elected mayor. The DRI Local Planning Committee was appointed in 2016. And in 2017, Downtown Revitalization Initiative Strategic Investment Plan was completed. That's a very lengthy document, put together a lot of information that was collected by consultants and so forth. And I believe one or two of our speakers will go into that in a little more detail. In May 2017, the governor announced the award of the $10 million DRI grant to Plattsburgh. And then through 2018, there was a parking study completed. There was an RFP issued to economic development consultants. And then in late 2018, there was an RFP issued for the Durkee lot development. It's interesting to note the timing on that. In October, October 17th, the RFP was issued to potential developers. And then just over 3 weeks later, the deadline for proposals was slated, and there was a 3-week period in which developers had to respond to the proposal for the development of the Durkee Street lot. And then now 2019, there's been several meetings by the Plattsburgh Parking Advisory Committee. Early in 2017, a letter of intent was executed between the city and Prime Development, otherwise known as Prime Companies LLC. That's the arm of Prime Development that is planning on the development project here on Derby Street. In March 2019, the city entered into a development agreement with Prime, and from throughout the spring and summer, there have been actions before the Common Council, the City Planning Board, the City Zoning Board of Appeals, and we're now in a sort of a holding pattern, waiting for the state environmental quality review process to be completed. You may have heard the term generic environmental impact statement. There will be a public hearing coming up on that item in the near future. I don't believe the date has been announced yet, but we urge you all to keep that on your radar. And now, I think at this point, I'd like to turn it over to our first speaker, and that is Sylvie Udriel. Sylvie, I'll let you go ahead and give us your background. Thank you, Sylvie.
Thank you, Scott. Hi, my name is Syl Boudreau, and I teach history here at Plattsburgh State University. And I've been following this DRI since April 15th, 2019. So it's been about 6 months that we've been following this and slowly sort of getting more involved in watching what's going on at the local level. So my goal here tonight is to talk to you about some of the issues that we have with the, specifically with the Durkee Street parking lot redevelopment part of the DRI. So we're not opposed to the DRI. We're not opposed to downtown revitalization. A lot of people will label us as being anti-DRI, and nothing could be further from the truth. So we're perhaps critical of this particular aspect of the DRI. So I just wanted to, I don't have much time, so I just briefly want to outline a number of issues that we have. And I also want to state that we're doing our best to find out the facts about a very complex project which has a lot of moving parts. So if at any point we don't get it right, if you think we're not getting it right, please let us know, because we're really committed to finding out the truth. And we're really committed to having an open and transparent dialogue. So with that being said, please fill out your cards or fill out comments and let us know if we get it wrong. Let me tell you about some of the issues that we have with the current iteration of this plan. The first issue, I think, and perhaps the most egregious one, is the issue of process and procedure, the way that this whole thing has been handled. Extensive and continuous public consultation was required by the DRI rules. The results of these consultations appear to have been disregarded, as the state and the city allocated the lion's share of the DRI funding, $4.3 million, to a project, the redevelopment of the Durkee Street parking lot, which, according to SUNY Plattsburgh's dot polls, was amongst the least popular options. So if you look at what people voted for during the public consultations, developing the Durkee Street parking lot was one of the least popular initiatives. In other words, most people voted for other things, and this thing got, I think, maybe the third lowest amount of votes. So clearly the public wasn't in favor of this, but somehow something happened whereby the least popular option became the one that the state and the city endorsed. So of the $10 million, 4.3 were allocated to this mega project on Durkee Street. Next is the lack of public input into the elaboration of the RFP. And I want to make sure that all of you know that RFP means request for proposals. So once the Durkee Street redevelopment was agreed upon, the city put out what's called an RFP, a request for proposals. And what you get depends on what you ask for. So the RFP is really a key moment in how we got to now. In other words, the RFP is maybe where the whole process went awry. There was a lack, my view, I could be wrong, is that there was a lack of public input into the elaboration of the RFP. And let me tell you how it happened. The Plattsburgh Citizens Coalition tried to find out about the RFP and wouldn't get any information from the city. So we had to do a Freedom of Information law request to find out how the RFP was elaborated. Who was responsible for public input into the RFP? So according to the DRI stipulations, there should have been a stakeholder committee. There should have been a committee of local citizens, residents, who advised the people who put together the RFP. And so there was a mysterious committee called the Public Advisory Committee, PAC. We couldn't find out who was appointed to be on that committee to represent the community. So we had to do a Freedom of Information request to find out who was on the committee. And lo and behold, when we did get the FOIL request back, we found out that it was made up of 2 city employees, Matt Miller and Ethan Vinson, and a city representative on the county legislator, Chris Rosenquist. We've heard rumors that the committee has never met, and Matt Miller was left to elaborate the RFP with no input from stakeholders. Now, the original plan stated that this, quote, the City of Plattsburgh City Council will approve the selection considering input from downtown business owners, residents, and the public, unquote. That's a quote from the original document. The city proceeded to approve the selection with no input from stakeholders, which is in part why we are now in this mess. I call it a mess. The city has heard from stakeholders after inking the deal with Prime LLC, not before. Then the city hired a consulting firm to elaborate the RFP for the Durkee Street project, and I believe that the firm did it again without public input. The RFP was produced by consultants called White and Burke, and it was notable for a near complete lack of public amenities and the elimination of a farmers and crafters market from the Durkee Street site. So it was left to experts who were hired, outside experts, to come and tell us what we needed to do on in that space. So if you want to know what really happened and why it matters, it was that moment that led us to where we are now. So following the RFP, we're also concerned by the fact that only a single bid came out for the RFP. If, according to White and Burke's financial and economic viability study, the experts said that this was a viable project, if that's the case, if it's such a promising project, why did only one company bid on it? That is a concern that we have. Once the Prime LLC agreement was signed, the city immediately proceeded to redesign the downtown area in terms of closing certain streets, making others one-way, using diagonal parking, and turning other areas of the downtown into a pedestrian-unfriendly parking lot. And despite considerable public criticism and opposition to these plans, resignation of PPAC committee members, and a petition to stop this plan, the city continued to proceed not only without consulting the public, but in the face of a storm of public outcry. This is not how the DRI plans envisaged the accomplishment of its goals. And then the city attempted to impose a paid parking regime, and that was also extremely controversial, and apparently the city has backed off on that, at least temporarily. So citizens of Plattsburgh were being told, we're going to take away your so-called free parking lot, even though it's paid for by the property owners in the special assessment district. So you're losing your so-called free parking, and now you're going to have to pay to park henceforth. So that also, the optics of that were not very good. Another issue we have is that of adding more retail space, because the project is supposed to be retail or commercial space. And that's an issue for us because right now, if you look around our town, bricks and mortars establishments are closing. It's called Amazon.com. People are shopping online. They call it the retail apocalypse. So the Prime LLC plan involves the addition of significant amount of retail space at the ground level. And this is happening at a time when there are currently at least 32 empty storefronts in Plattsburgh, some of which are directly proximate to the Durkee Street parking lot. So we are concerned that this is going to be a flop and that those places will remain unrented. We're also concerned by what I call forced gentrification. Here's the ultimate question that I would like someone to answer for me. Who will be renting the 114 apartments in the Prime LLC complex? The mayor and the city have never answered this question. The complex will apparently bring 114 new, quote, high-income earners, unquote. Average income, $70,000 to $100,000 per annum. In Plattsburgh, that's considered a high roller. I call that a high roller. So where are we going to get 114 new high-income earners who are going to want to rent apartments on Durkee Street? That too, and especially to live in an area which has not been gentrified so far. There is a question of a seeming failure of the city and or its consultants to comprehend how gentrification happens successfully. If you do want a city to gentrify, it has to happen naturally. You can't impose it from the top down. I could spend an hour talking about this, but I won't. There's an issue, and finally the issue is the terms of the agreement itself. $4.3 million in taxpayer-generated DRI funds, giving away 4.6 acres of centrally located riverside real estate, and an overly generous pilot agreement, which my colleagues are going to discuss in a minute. Most of us feel that this is unacceptable, especially given that this project brings no public amenities, and it also fails to do a really key thing. In the DRI original proposal, the idea was that that we were hoping to redevelop the downtown and to create, quote, a new node of activity at the intersection of Bridge and Durkee Street. We were going to reimagine that space and have a new node of public activity. How does a private apartment complex achieve that goal? How is that a public activity? I think you will agree that it's not. There's a failure to achieve the goal of connecting the historic downtown with the Saranac riverfront. That was another stated goal of the DRI plan. A sidewalk between an apartment building and a parking lot does not constitute an improved connection to the riverside. Also, the original initial DRI plan called for, quote, approximately 1 acre of new on-site open space for public use. Currently, there is no open space for public use. And then finally, and most controversially, the issue of eliminating the farmers and crafters market from the downtown area. The point of the DRI was to make the downtown less of a food desert and to bring synergy between the co-op, the farmers market, and food incubators, all with the goal of encouraging entrepreneurship. We feel that the farmers market does make the downtown a node of activity. And to move it to a condemned MLD storage bunker adjacent to the municipal sewage treatment plant is a terrible idea for our community. All right, I have other concerns, but I'm going to stop it there because I have more to say. And
Phil warned us about this.
Yeah.
She
I know now about.
she wanted a half an
yeah.
hour. She wanted half an hour, and I said, "Oh, we can't keep these people here this late.
Thank you very
We'll have
much.
to have a morning session to hear." And Phil is a tremendous student of the whole BRI. She's a tremendous asset on our board of directors for Plattsburgh Citizens Coalition. Thank you very much, Phil. And I'd like to move on to the next specific issue that's on the agenda, and that's the downtown parking impacts. And that'll be Kevin Farrington. Kevin, I'll let you introduce yourself, all your credentials, and then we'll try to keep 10 minutes or so, and then we'll talk about the pilot agreement following that.
Okay. Scott's going to keep a timer on
Yes,
because
I
he
can.
knows I get a little long-winded, but I'm trying to
Timer's
contain
running.
myself. Thank you for coming. You can advance to the, what clicker's mine? You'll be my clicker, I guess.
Okay, I'll click for it.
I'm not sure what So, yeah, thank you all for coming here. I know you took out time out of your day because you care about the community, you're concerned, and like all of us, we want some straight information, which we quite frankly have not received in a very productive way. And we want to know what's going on here. And, you know, thank you to Sil and some of the other people that came before, and I give them a lot of credit because it's only through that tracking of that history, and I know it's long and lengthy and arduous, but it is so important because how we got here is a real problem. And so you heard a little glimpse of that, but thank you to those people who were such good citizens that they spent their time and energy tracking that and can report on it very well. All right, I'm going to talk about parking, but before I do, I would like to just make one quick comment, and that is this. So you heard about this strategic plan. Everybody talks about it. You know, we had, there was a public involvement process. Of course, the state makes you follow certain amount of public meetings, and the city has to collect certain survey information. And, you know, you also hear some misinformation. Oh, the state's making us do that. You've heard that out of City Hall. Well, we don't have any choice. The previous mayor already committed us to this. The state is the DRI that's already approved. We have no choice. Well, that's not true, okay? Clarification number one. Cities, and read the DRI program for yourself, and I have it right here, are autonomous, and the state wants it that way. They want you to guide your own development within certain guidelines, okay? And that's generally what's taken place. The first sentence before I start on parking is this right here, and what it says is, recognizing that companies are increasingly seeking to relocate and invest in vibrant, walkable downtowns. I'm going to talk to you about parking, and what you're going to see, we'll go through some numbers and some details, and you'll see where there's a lot of falsehoods, a lot of errors, a lot of misconceptions, and quite frankly, a lot of really amateur design. Okay, I hate to say, I know that sounds a little arrogant, maybe it is, but frankly it is. But at the end of the numbers and the comparisons and the counts, what we're seeing here, and this is the theme that's going to stick with you, what we're seeing is, what our city is doing for us is they're putting prime and prime's profits first and putting you second. They're so convinced that having 114 units worth of people living downtown is going to change the world that they're willing to give away your municipal parking lot for $1. They're willing to give away $4.3 million out of our $10 million to this group. And they're willing to give a pilot agreement that Cynthia and Jeremiah will tell you about that is so lucrative that it abates something in the neighborhood of 80% of their taxes over 20 years. And I know Renee would be able to comment on the specifics of that. And when it was said, our aim is to be factual. If we say something that's not correct, by all means, tell us. We will take responsibility and try to correct that. They'll run through the numbers and the specifics. Maybe it's 75, maybe it's 80, and we think it's 83. Who would like an 83% tax abatement for 20 years? Who would like to get the property that you live on for free? Right, okay. So this is what's going on. So we're going to talk a little bit about the specifics of parking, but that's the theme that you're going to see etched throughout, is that instead of creating the overarching theme of the DRI, which is a more walkable downtown, a more bicycle-friendly downtown, a more quaint and vibrant downtown that makes businesses want to invest and, invest in a business down there, that makes business patrons want to frequent the establishment, that makes people want to have an enjoyable downtown experience. That's all taking the back seat so that we can give everything we gotta give to this prime development so they can make their profit. And we might be giving them so much that they don't have skin in the game. We might be giving them so much, they let it go vacant, and we're left with tumbleweeds in Ghost Town in 5 years, and that's another question that you should think about. All right, but let's move on. Let's talk about parking before Scott shuts me off. All right, so this is a nice picture. This is what is in the strategic plan. One of the things you'll notice is there is a full acre, about a third, that is devoted to, and it talks about a variety of business aspects and gathering spaces, event space, and things that make people, something new that's an attraction that says, hey, let's go downtown and spend the day. Let's walk downtown with the family and spend the day down there. Let's have lunch at a restaurant and check this out. I don't think there's anybody in Montreal who's going to get in their car and go, come on, kids, let's go downtown and see that swell new gated community at the corner of Dirty and Bridge. And so what you see, can we go to the next one, Scott? So instead of that, and this, by the way, so then there was a second report, and that was called Turkey Street Reimagined, and there was a group collected, and they further developed that, and they also did a market analysis where they said, what is smart development, worthwhile investment, something that's actually viable where people would want to invest and build. And you can read that report too, and at the end of that, what they really did is they turned, instead of turning their back on the river, which is what this plan does, creates alleys and dangerous places and little token gestures about a 5-foot sidewalk, and, something that, I certainly wouldn't want my daughter walking down what we refer to as danger alley, and I'll show you that in a minute. This is what they said. They said, let's not turn our back on the river, let's face the river. They had lower up here, I wanted to bring a laser pointer and I didn't. Does anyone have a laser pointer? Lower elevation business type opportunities here, higher buildings here, more views of the river, green rooftops, access on the rooftop, gathering spaces, and you can see quite a bit of green, and something that says that's interesting, something that is open to the public, something that is inviting to the community. Let's go to the next one. Here's what we got. This is not in black and white. That's in color. If you squint really hard, you'll see a little green in there. So just squint, and that's what you'll find. Now, you're going to hear an awful lot about the Saranac River Walk. That's it right there. Now, that, and by the way, notice there's a wall right there. Okay. So that's what appears from the drawings to be a second-story parking and underground parking. That's we think a 5-story, I think, from the architectural renderings, 60-foot wall. So there's your Saranac River Walk. It's a 5-foot sidewalk. So some of the counselors, all they want to know, is it ADA compliant? It's 5 foot. Like, that's the best question you got to ask? Okay, it's 5 foot. Good for you. That's Danger Alley. And by the way, there's already a walkway there. It's nothing new. Okay? That's a 60-foot wall and a wooded riverbank. There's your token gesture. That's what we have to give you. We gave everything else to Prime. The Saranac River Trail, Phase 2, was supposed to be built 3 years ago. Our current administration can't figure out how to get it done. Saranac River Trail Phase 3 was just too complicated. They didn't realize that was specifically intended to coincide with the DRI. In fact, that was built with overlapping, the DRI is perfectly sandwiched between phase 2 and phase 3. Phase 2 is right here and goes down Durkee Street. Phase 3 is on Green Street. Now they want to develop Green Street, but they don't realize that they've been trying to sabotage the Saranac River Trail Phase 3. That's $1.2 million that could have been used as off funds, and vice versa. And the community development director at the time looked into that and confirmed, depending on which grant stream, that those were matching funds. So that was $1.2 million that your government wants to give away because it's just too complicated. We've got a DRI and a nice river cleanup to think about, and it's just too complicated for us. So what you see is this theme of neglect of public infrastructure, neglect, God bless you, of walkability, basically neglect of public benefit. Let's get to the parking before I start talking too long. If I haven't already, maybe I have. All right, so this is a nice little 3D visual if you haven't seen this already. I think or that's a, go to the next one if you would, Scott. And you can see some of the same things I just mentioned. Admittedly, that's an artist took a little bit of liberties there for Danger Alley. But it actually would extend quite a bit further than that, because I think it's something like 200 or 300 feet long. I'm not quite sure if I can scale that. But that's what they're building. That's our famed Saranac River Walk. Now listen, these are the plans that are put out. Okay, I didn't make this stuff up. If you look, these are the plans that the city is sharing with us. This is now one thing before, let's establish what is, if you don't mind, I'm getting a lot of here. So we talk about parking. We've got a committee established and everyone's meeting and they're talking about parking. And by the way, 3 or 4 people have resigned in protest. Another one started a petition. They've got 5 shills from the staff on there and they vote 5-4, and everybody from the public votes no, and the 5 staff members under the current tyranny vote yes, and it goes like that. So that's what's going on. And you can watch and see where people resign in council meetings and issued scathing letters and so forth. So they have these parking committee meetings. So we're losing, this is unique because most people develop on a plot of land, you buy, you build. This is different. We have our primary municipal parking space here. So that has to be considered. Where do we go? If we move that out, where do we put it? Now, one of the fundamental flaws, in my opinion, of the parking committee is that it has to be understood that short-term parking and long-term parking are 2 different things. Now, anyone who's a business owner here knows that short-term parking in front and in close proximity is critical. Because if a group of people from the college want to come down and have lunch at the Pepper or Iris's, let's face it, they can't park near there, they're going to the butcher block. And that's just reality. And you can do all the bravado, tough talk you want about suck it up, buttercup, and let's learn to walk a couple blocks, it won't kill you. That's well and good. But let's face reality. It's important for businesses. Scott and I are business owners. We have almost 50 employees. That makes us, I think it makes us the largest non-governmental employee downtown. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's a concern for us. So the first thing is there's 289 spaces in the Durkee Street parking lot. The starting proposition is that the prime development will replace all of them, or will provide their own demand for their building, plus 50 public parking spaces. We don't know yet exactly how they'll be managed or what the cost will be, permitting and all these things. Set that aside. However, we don't know what they're building. There's 10,000 square feet of commercial. Now, they took the most generous, easiest rate of 1 per 250 square feet. Now, if that's a restaurant, coffee shop, bagel shop, sandwich shop, that means that they need 200 more spaces there, because that's a 1 per 50 in the code. Does anybody know? They haven't told us. So are they meeting, or are they actually having a deficit of 150? See, so we don't know. So, all right, let's say that it's 289, let's call it 300 for round numbers. And let's also leave out the fact that this is supposed to be a revitalization effort. So if we're even marginally successful, we are going to improve vitality, right? We're going to have more business, more people, more parking, more businesses, more lower vacancies in rental units and in stores. We're going to have more vibrancy. We're going to have more parking. The Carl Walker parking plan told us we're in the sweet spot. We are maxed out. We have 8.5 per 10 spaces full. That's perfect. I might have to drive around the block once till I find that space. So we're just right what Carl Walker called just right. The good news is we're sitting pretty. The bad news is we don't have any wiggle room at all. All right, let's start with this one. Army Pavone. Okay. We got 115 spaces. I think it's actually more like 100. Let's say it's accurate. For one thing, the city thinks we're above the law. I've seen a lot of developments in the city. Every single one of them has been held to the code. The developer on Miller Street lately who had to do a subdivision and get 3 more feet because he was parking too close to a property line. But for the city, that's perfectly okay. 24-foot aisles, even though the code says 26. They don't have a turnaround lane here. So you can drive all the way down, and you got to get to a dead end and drive all the way back out. And by the way, here's the walkability issue. I didn't tell you, but this sidewalk comes out. So let's put Prime first. Let's give them all half of our 10 million. Let's relieve them of taxes, and let's rip out whatever sidewalks we need to do. So while we're trying to make it more quaint, more walkable downtown, what's the city doing? They're ripping out a sidewalk. Now, you know what? Correct me if I'm wrong, modify the plan, put in a sidewalk. I say bravo. But right now, that's what they're doing. Okay, next one. Scott? Got to wrap up? Okay, he's giving me the...
We're getting down in time.
Oh, yeah, we got to take up all the
There's a lot of
time.
detail to go through.
All right, I'll breeze over this very quickly, but I think you can see the theme and see where I'm going. The county parking lot, very briefly. First of all, they're creating 60 or 66 public parking spaces, and there's going to be some type of a permitting arrangement. Number one, they authorized the mayor to sign an agreement before they saw the agreement. They certainly didn't provide it to the public. That's our government. Number two, they never got a building permit to do it. They never went to site plan review to do it, because if they did, it wouldn't have survived. You know why? It doesn't comply with code. And one of the things the code says is that every commercial property should have walkable access to the building. There is one there now. Look, right there. That gets ripped out. Give half the money to Prime, take out as many public sidewalks as you need. There's 44 visitor parking spaces out there now. Now, there's a major overflow lot on Oak Street that's outside the DRI zone. All those employees are parking over there. If we've got to, if all this does is invite those employees from outside the zone back into the zone because they got to walk across the street every morning, what have we accomplished? Have we added anything? And then the last one, and I'll wrap up, is, keep going. And there is a small 7 spaces or so added at the Durkee Street south lot. And again, when you count them, and if I had more time, I'd show you, but it's always with slight exaggeration. They say 13 when it's 7. They don't account for minimum code compliance and dimensions. They didn't put handicap spaces in. You do all that, the numbers never add up, and I wish I had more time because I'd show you the specifics on that. And then lastly, and I'll stop talking because we do want to leave plenty of time for public comment. That was the last one, okay. So I guess, you get the main topic is that here we have a great opportunity to improve our downtown walkability, bikeability, Saranac River Trail, and instead, we're turning Durkee Street into a parking lot. And I didn't even get into all the cocky-mamie half-baked ideas that were put out and thrown out, Oak Street, diagonal parking and all these other things. So that's part of the reason we are concerned as a business that this could have a significant adverse impact on us. And we are really questioning our ability to continue to operate our business in downtown Plattsburgh. And we think that you should be too.
Thank you very much, Kevin. What have you learned so far, folks? We've given away our parking lot for $1. We've given the developer $4.3 million of our DRI, and we are facing a new parking plan that might or might not work. We have questions about that, as you can see. And another issue related to this, a very important issue that affects all of us, is this pilot agreement. I'm going to first call to Snow, that pilot agreement. You provide your background, credentials, and we'll have Jeremiah follow up.
Thank you so much. I do not want to say I'm an expert on pilot programs, but I have brought 2 pilot programs to the Clinton County IDA in my role as the controller of Bombardier Corporation. Now, I think we can all see that would be thoughtful, but I want to give you just a little bit of background about what a pilot program is. So what a pilot program is payment in lieu of taxes. So instead of all of us, like we do in the city of Plattsburgh, paying our $43 per thousand assessed value, a new business can come to Plattsburgh and go to the Clinton County IDA and say, and Renee, if I say anything wrong, please forgive me. These guys did some heavy lifting with getting all the FOIA documents between you and the council and the school board, and also all the documents associated with the proposal done by Prime. So I kind of summarized some of that, but please jump in if there's anything. I've actually got a lot of your stuff, so please do that. So anyways, so we all pay $43 a thousand. I am a city resident, have been for 33 years. Happy to pay my $43 a thousand, not. But also, the other thing to remember is we all get a star exemption if the city stays under their 2% cap. And I think everybody should hear that very carefully. We all get a star exemption, okay? So the other thing that's interesting is I'm just going to talk to you about what the mission and the criteria that Renee presented to the city council when they were talking about this whole pilot agreement. The first criteria is job creation. Okay, so my Bombardier background, right, it was so easy to go to the IDA and say, hey, we're building this huge plant, we're going to build some trains. We hope to have about 500 employees, right? That's great. It's great. You're going to be net new employees to our community. And also at the time, the basis was dwindle. And not only was Bombardier going to bring all this industry with this pilot program, there was going to be these offshoot industries at the base filling those. So it was so easy selling that pilot program to the community, right? It was easy to do because the job creation was there. What job creation is Prime bearing? Does anybody know? In the proposal, it's 2. 2 jobs will be created by Prime. The next thing is that in the proposal is that local contractors, materials will be used in the construction of these projects. Well, that's great, right? That's really great. So in the cost-benefit analysis that Prime did and presented, they said, yeah, we're going to have about $9 million of payroll costs during the construction phase of this project. So that's going to give us payroll taxes. That doesn't come back to the city, the county. It's all state. That's not a benefit for our community in any way. That doesn't work. The next thing is they've got to be compliant with the IDA mission. I'm not going to go into that. It's a little longer. And then the last thing that the benefits must be necessary for the project to be developed. It has to be clear on the face of the project that this is good for our community. Okay, so I just want you to keep that in mind. That's what the rules are. So I also want you to keep in mind this little thing, that it's 114 units. And one of the things that was presented at the public hearing for Prime with the IDA is some of these units will actually be run by Marriott as executive stay units. Okay, so in the RFP, what they had said is that 67% of these units are going to be 700 square feet. It's about the size of a hotel room, right? It's not an apartment. Some of these don't even have room for anything more than a bed and little, coffee station, and a bathroom. They're not big. 700 square feet is pretty small. And then there's some 2-bedroom units that are around 1,100 square feet, 1,200 square feet. The price for the 700 square foot is about $1,000. And the 2 bedrooms are going to be about $1,400, okay? So that's what is in the proposal that was given to the IDA. So then what was given to the proposal is they were saying, well, we want tax abatement, and we want quite a bit of it. I think the number turns out to be somewhere right around $3 million, okay, that they want to pay over 20 years. So in my naivety, I said to myself, well, that's like $150,000 a year. Wow, that's not very much. Think about what we pay for our homes, right? We pay for, let's say, a $100,000 home. We pay $4,300. A $200,000 home, $8,600. And they want to only pay $150,000 a year for this 114 homes? That doesn't seem quite right to me. But that's not really what's in the agreement. What's really in the agreement is they want to pay nothing for the first 3 years on 114 units. Then for the next 7 years, they want to pay $1,000 a unit. For the next 5 years, they want to pay $1,300 a unit. And then for the last 5 years, they want to pay $1,500 a unit. That's it. That is it. Now, what other benefits does Prime get? Prime gets all of the mortgage taxes, recording tax, for free. That's $165,000, which would have gone into our county coffers. They also get tax abatement on all of the materials used to build it, which would also go into our community coffers, and the estimate on the cost-ability analysis is $680,000. Okay, so let's add that up a little bit. Okay, they're asking for the mortgage tax, they're asking for the sales tax, they're asking for this 60-some-odd% abatement, if you look at full assessed value versus this $1,000 a month per unit. It's a lot of money we're giving away. So again, I'm not an expert, but I can run the numbers. Just so you know, I'm a CPA in my other job. Working in Vermont, so you can look at my CPA license. It's not there. It's on suspension while I'm in Vermont. All I got to do is take a test. I get it back. So Jay LeBrun, as you know, superintendent of school, he's been saying some things that I think that might be really interesting to all of you. This is in an August 2nd letter to the IDA. I think all of us know that economic development is important for our community, and I am pro-development. Always have been. I've been a business owner in the community for a long time. I want Plattsburgh to grow and thrive. I am for the DRI, and I was on the original DRI committee back with Jim Calnan, and sat with the consultants to come up with the ideas for the DRI, and there's a lot we could do to make this city vibrant. But one of the things we can't do is we can't do it on the backs of the taxpayers of the city, right? It's not fair to us that own homes and businesses. So, 67% of that, millions of dollars, and I'm going to let my colleague go over that a little bit more. But here's what Jay says. The economic development, including the net new residences, is acknowledged, and the concept of a pilot is on which, in which the board really supports. But the Board of Education recognizes the role of advocate for the tax-paying constituents of this community and feels that 67% tax abatement is way too high. Shifting 67% of Prime's tax responsibility over a 20-year period cannot be supported by the Board of Education. What he wants to do is encourage the IDA to a more modest abatement over a shorter period of time. And the tax-paying citizenship should not be made to support the profits of a private corporation. And I wanted to share his thoughts with you because I think that's what you need to take home. And I appreciate all of you taking your time out of the day today to be here. And if you believe what the DRI project and the Prime project is going to be great for our community, I'm happy that you would support that. But if you believe that this might not be great for our community, I would like you to be beacons of light and tell your friends and neighbors not to support this, not to let this private corporation come to our community and have this huge tax abatement, which will impact our taxes in our homes and businesses. If we have the numbers, you can ask us questions, we can share with you documents, but that's what the message I wanted to give you tonight. I want you to feel emotional about this because I love my house and I don't want my taxes to go up. There's one last point I wanted to give you. From the documents that were shared with the IDA, and this is something that really concerned me, and my friend's going to go over it a little bit more. At the end of the 20-year period, we were looking at what's going to be the tax rate then. And we did some number crunching on it from what was presented at the IDA, and it appears, and it could have just been a mistake, that the assessment of this building that's supposed to be around $20-some-odd million goes down to $10 million at the end of 20 years. And then at full assessment, at that point, they estimated to be about $54 a thousand. So they'd be paying around $500,000 per year. But it's a $22 million building, which at full occupancy and time value should go up in value over time, right? Not be reduced by 50%. So I'm going to let my colleague crunch some more numbers here. Thank you so much.
Jeremiah, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, I'm Jeremiah Ward. I live in the city of Plattsburgh. I do some side projects in the city of Plattsburgh, like I ran the co-op renovation project a few years back. My main line of work is I'm an affordable housing developer, mostly in Vermont, a little bit over here in Plattsburgh. Been doing that work for the last 10 years, so my background is have a master's degree in urban planning, and my background is in real estate finance. And yeah, Cynthia did such a great job on the pilot. I will start by just saying that, we've heard percentages like Jay LeBrun's letter and address talked about a discount in the 60% on 60% for this tax abatement. Kevin mentioned as high as 83 or 84%. It's a function of to determine what that discount that Prime would be getting is. It's a function of what the tax value would be if there were no pilot. So what the assessment would be if there was no tax break. That's how they set what the percentage discount is. So the lower numbers, like in the 60%, is based on what we think is, they're thinking that this building is going to ultimately assess after the pilot ends at around 10 million, when in fact, it should assess much closer to 22.7 plus million. Assessments should be based on the expected sale price of a property. It is for us as homeowners, right? We all just got assessment increases to reflect the fact that market conditions, the values of our homes have increased over the last couple of years. Assessment should try to approximate what your home would sell for. It should be the same for commercial properties, though the methodology for determining the value is a little different. To just give you a point to hammer home that Prime should be assessed at over 22 million. In their pilot application, they are expecting to leverage around 16 million in bank financing for their project. A bank would never lend $16 million on something that's only worth 10 million. They would lend $16 million on something that's worth 23 million. That's how banks work. They want to make sure that they have a sound investment. So if you assume a $22.7 million building and assessment, then yes, this proposed pilot is an 84% discount given to Prime over the course of 20 years. They're asking for $2.9 million over 20 years when they should be paying a fair market assessment, $18 million over the same period. That means they're getting a $15 million tax break over 20 years if you're playing fair. If they're playing on the same terms that we as homeowners in the city play by, the same tax rate, same valuation. So that's where the discrepancy is in calculating what the discount is given to Prime is. But just to bring it closer to home, how this impacts the city. Over 20 years, the city itself will get about $42,000 out of that proposed pilot. $42,000. That's, the other parts of the payment will go towards the school district and go towards the county. $42,000 in annual revenue on average will go to the city. That's just the starting point. But then you have to think, to make this development possible, the city has to take a taxable property offline, which is the Glens Falls National Building. So when you subtract out the revenue loss there off the $42,000 starting point, we're down to $32,000 that's the city has to play with to pay for additional services. But then to acquire the Glens Falls building, demolish it, pay parking over it there, do other paving elsewhere to replace the parking loss on the Durkee Street site. The final figures for all this parking replacement costs are to be determined, but I think it's a reasonable, conservative approximate $1 million in terms of work to replace the parking over the city seems reasonable. So to pay for the debt to finance that $1 million in making this project possible that the city has to put in, the amount for the city shrinks even more, from 42 to start, down to 32 from losing the Glens Falls building, down to 27,000 to pay for debt service on that construction. 27,000, not a lot. It's equivalent to, say you have your typical house in the city of Plattsburgh, 150,000 is the value. That's equivalent, 27,000 years, equivalent to $1,550,000 homes paying taxes. We're bending ourselves around, trying to figure out all this replacement parking, moving the farmer's market, all this crazy stuff for the equivalent of 15 homes paying taxes over 20 years. It's crazy. Another way of putting it is 27,000, that's not even enough to pay for one full-time minimum wage employee in New York State when you factor in payroll taxes. So we're talking about bringing in 114 households that are going to trigger the need for additional city services, and the city only has around 27,000 net to play with. So they can't even hire half a cop for that, or pay the overtime for whatever services are required by that many households coming in, if they do in fact come. So that means that there's a precariousness to this deal that puts potential tax burden onto the rest of us who, dollars for dollar are paying a much higher tax rate than what Prime will be paying during this time period. So I'll leave it at that, and then, I don't know. Good. Thank you.
Can I just make one more change? I wanted to make sure what he said is everybody's clear. It's $27,000 per year because of that
Yes.
100 and some odd thousand that we'll get per year. The breakdown at our current percentages of, I think our current percentages are 56% to the school district, the city gets 29%, and the county gets 13%. So I wanted to just bring home this one last point. 114 new homes. Now, we don't know if those are going to be net new people or people in existing homes in Plattsburgh are going to move into those new places, right? They might be convenient for some people. right, that might have some mobility issues, right, because they're going to be downtown, they're going to be in a place that's safe, they don't have to mow the lawn, all of those types of things. So we don't know if there's a net new, but I wanted to bring this point home. With that split that I talked about, the 56% going to the school district, that would work out to be $84,000 per year possible net new income to the school district. But if you go to the New York State Board of Education site, the cost per city pupil in the city school district is $25,000 per pupil. So that means if we have 4 new pupils in the 114 units, that will wipe out the income for the school district. And I just wanted to make that one last point.
Thank you, Sophie. So, getting the picture, folks. Maybe prime development is not the silver bullet solution that some people think. At this time, we'd like to give you to ask questions. Anybody have anything? Yes, over here.
Scott, as somebody who does works with bidding and projects, do you think that a 3-week window to respond to requests for bids on a project this size was a reasonable time frame for any group and contractor capable of doing the project to respond?
No, not at all. You mystified us. Thank you. Yes.
My name is Renee McFarland. I'm the director of the Clinton County IDA. I just want to address a couple of the points. I think some of the facts that may have struck out to people, one of them in particular was the valuation of the proposed building. $22.7 million is what the estimated cost to build it is. However, the cost to build far exceeds the cost for the assessed value, and the way I estimated the assessed value is based on the income approach, which is what our assessor uses in the city. So I used, I believe, $72,500 per unit on average to get to $8.6 million, and then I think $9.50 per square foot of commercial space, which I think is about the average assessment in the city. So the $72,500, if you want to think about it in terms of comparison to your own home, for a 700 square foot apartment, I mean, that probably maxed out about, right, 72,500, 700 square feet as opposed to my house, which is however many square feet, 1,800, and then I think our assessed value is like 155 or something to that effect. One thing I do need to make sure that I clarify is that the IDA's criteria for considering a project, when the board considers a project application, is that all projects that the board approves are supposed to foster private investment, and the last sentence of the mission statement is to improve the quality of life and well-being for the residents of Clinton County. So we also value infill development, which would be a project like this, right in the center of downtown, creating that dense development, because it might be that 15 homes could produce the $133,000 a year average over the first 10 years of the pilot that Prime has requested. But you're not, you're probably not getting those 15 homes right on the Durkee Street parking lot, and instead there's an opportunity for 114 households. Back to the assessed value, though, that $8.6 million. So that's not something that like started at 22 for the first 20 years. That's what we expected the assessed value to be right out the gate. So foster private investment, quality of life, well-being of the residents, and
Thank you.
infill development,
Thank you.
and adaptive
Yes,
reuse.
So,
I mean, there's an awful lot of things that the IDA
Renee,
considers.
if I may, Renee, you hold a quasi-public position, so I would
I
invite
do.
anybody to, if they have questions, to use that
My question,
time.
I have a question.
Because the rest of us here are mostly private positions, and
Oh, I
we all
forgot,
have
the
places to go.
economic impact actually is estimated to be like $660,000 a year to the city at minimum, what those new households will spend. So,
Okay, so can we go on to another question? Yes, ma'am, up front here. Thank you.
I got two questions.
Yeah.
Who's got the money now? And there was a lot of, I've heard a lot of things about how the city was required to have public input. Is the city required to follow the public input?
The city, your question is the city required to follow the public input? Well, we certainly would hope that as our elected officials, that they would give strong consideration to the public input. I think we've laid out a pretty good case for what public input was prior to the issuance of the RFP to developers and how that has changed. Sylvia, would you like to comment on that?
yeah, I'd just like to comment that.
So why don't you come up and be near the microphones? I know the media here, has got the microphones and would like to record this session, so.
I just want to comment that,
I know it's sitting here.
sure, that once the deal with Prime was signed, it was, I think it was around April 15th, we had no, not April 15th, sorry, don't quote me on that. Once the deal was signed and the city council voted on it, the day that the city council held the vote, we publicly said things at the council meeting. We also held a protest, a very loud, vocal and visible protest outside of the city hall. And at the end of the council meeting, one of the councilors came out and engaged with us and spoke to us. And we addressed this question of lack of public accountability. And we were told that that the city had made the decision on our behalf and that we needed to trust them that they were doing the right thing for us. And that was the end of the discussion. And since then, we have not had an opportunity to speak.
There's no requirement for the funds.
Yes, there are. The DRI plan, if you choose to read it, it's all online. It calls for constant, at every stage in the game,
Right.
constant, meaningful dialogue with the citizens.
I don't care about dialogue. Are they required to follow the public?
Comment?
Sure, Kevin, would you like to address that? No,
Yeah, it's a good question. Yes, this is the strategic plan that was developed. Was there public meetings? Yes, there was. Was there surveys, questionnaires? Yes, there was. And it concluded with this report that breaks down the 10 million. A series of projects are submitted. The state reviews it, returns it, and says, okay, these are the top priorities as we see them. Now we're left with a roadmap. The figures that I showed you before, early, where I showed you ones that had lots of green, followed by ones that had lots of black.
Right.
That's what the city has done. So they've
Right.
taken the framework and the guidelines, but they've missed, in my opinion,
Right.
the overarching objectives, and they've really derailed it and lost most largely of the public benefit.
So how does the city still get the money?
Well, that's a good question. Are they still complying
That's my
with
question.
that? And, are they complying with the letter of the rules within the program?
That's the question.
They would argue that they are. Now, we would argue that they're not. And we are having communications with the governor's office, with the Department of State,
Okay.
and we're looking at legal avenues to really argue that point and to make that, to question that, because we don't think they are.
Okay. So that's
Yeah.
not decided.
One other really quick point too. A lot of what you hear is, oh, it's set in stone, we can't change it. It's what the state approved, it's what they make us do. Mayor Callahan figured it out. Well, you heard Mayor Callahan, he said that's a bunch of hogwash. Just this week, They're repurposing, what, about $200,000 that was going to go to the food co-op. And they declined it, and by the way, what you don't hear is they declined it in protest, because they are in protest of this current plan. So that money was generally purposed for food downtown, and now they're trying to repurpose it. So here you see, just this week, an example, and there's a request for proposals out, you can go look it up, where they're repurposing about $200,000. Well, we think they can do that, we know they can do that exact same thing. So this fear tactic, this fear mongering that you hear from City Hall that, hey, if we don't do this, we're gonna lose the whole 10 million, is patently false. What we'd like to do is take a step backwards. We'd like to see a no confidence vote in the mayor so that we can prevent him from being involved in moving this thing forward. We'd like to take 2 steps backwards, repurpose the money, and return to the plan. I don't necessarily love it, but it's okay. We can live with this. We can live with what was shown. And we can live with what the state approved. What we can't live with is what everything you heard tonight. So I don't know if that helps answer the question.
Other questions? Yes, Dave.
What is Prime exactly? Are they a huge corporation or are they local somehow or? I read our dying newspaper and I don't get a sense of what they are.
I think the corporate office is in Coles, down near the Albany region. I think they've, had a track record of some other developments. Some, I think notably one in Saratoga Springs. But they're New York State firm. Anybody like that? Anything of that?
Could I ask people to identify themselves maybe? What's your name? The lady who
I'm Chris Cortel,
Hi, Chris.
unhappy city resident, I guess.
Right, thank you. Just for the public record, it's good for people who are recording to know who it is that's speaking. Prime Companies is a very large, vertically integrated company that does a whole bunch of things, and one of the things they do is build buildings. So there's Prime all kinds of things, but there's also Prime real estate and there's real estate sales. It's easy to find out about. They're a Wall Street listed, publicly traded company. They're a very large corporation.
Statewide or nationwide?
Nationwide. But the focus of their activities is the capital region.
Are there linkages with any people in this community that are going to benefit from this contract?
Yes.
I think that's the question I would add to that, because planning by the way I live in town, my name is Luis Sierra. I guess one of the things that has intrigued me about this process, having been to several meetings, is first of all some of the mystery questions, like you don't just gentrify in that way. Number one, number two. I moved here around the time where that parking lot to nowhere was built, and that was mysterious. And then I'm watching this. You have to follow the money. Somebody's getting something somewhere, and I don't know who it is. And I don't see the Press Republican covering that. This is the first time I've been to a group where you actually, like what you said, Sylvie, was really, and I've heard Jeremiah speak before, that there really seems to be, I'm not saying that there's corruption, but clearly somebody's going to benefit.
Conflict of interest.
Yes, there's a conflict of interest, and somebody's benefited. And it's clearly not the residents of this town, and certainly not the businesses that are downtown.
I will just point out to you that after the mayor decided to sell his bank to the city to make way for parking for Prime, the company that found space for the mayor's bank downtown is Whitbeck. And Whitbeck is in the family of companies called Realogy. Realogy is an umbrella organization that includes Prime.
Interesting. Is anybody following and investigating that?
No.
I think it's also worth noting too that the Mayor Reed, of course, I think everybody knows by now, is on the board of Era Financial, which is the parent company of Glens Falls Bank. The city purchased Glens Falls Bank, and when asked about it, Colin Reed claimed that he disclosed his conflict of interest. Now, you can go back and look at the tape. He said he disclosed it and recused himself from the vote. Well, mayors don't vote unless there's a tiebreaker. He didn't vote at all. And you go back and look at the tape, he didn't recuse himself. Well, then he changed that. He said, well, I filled out a form at the beginning of the year that identifies all my conflicts of interest. But that, he claims, didn't legally qualify because of the dollar value threshold. Now, how much does he receive? He receives $50,000 a year, plus he holds about $500,000 worth of stock. Somebody checked the stock value today and will calculate his holdings. So he's received about $1 million in compensation from Arrow Financial since he became a board member in 2010. He basically lied when he said that he disclosed that. He did not. But he claims he meets the letter of the law, and let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Let's say he does. It doesn't materially rise to a conflict of interest. But let's face it, it doesn't pass the smell test. And then you see other conflicts of interest too on the board. And all due respect to Ms. McFarland, but her husband is a counselor. And there is a certain making a deal is incentivized. That's what the IDA does. Nothing wrong with that. That's their job, and they should. But to have that counselor be on the parking committee, and frankly acting more like a salesman than a person of objective interest. So you look at these conflicts of interest, and I think that most people would agree that ethically they are. Legally, are they? Okay, let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say they're not. But let's face it, when you say follow the money, I think that's a good question. And when you challenge the press Republican to look deeper into that, I would second that notion.
Could I
May
ask
I
you
just
another?
say,
We have another-
one more thing on that? Is also, people should know this, Prime has a portion of their business. I'm not sure if the Plattsburgh properties will be a part of this, but a portion of their other properties is funded with EB5 money. If you're unfamiliar with that, that's the way that some people can invest in properties or in businesses in the United States to get a green card. So the investment, depending on what type of property and where the property is located, you can actually give a business $500,000 in a more lesser valued area, or $1 million in a higher valued area as an investment for you to get a green card to enter the United States. So I wanted to make that point about Prime. But the second thing I didn't get to say during my presentation because I was kind of rushing is Prime actually will not be the owner of this property. What? Because the Industrial Development Agency will actually be the owner of record, and they will lease the property back to Prime, because that's the way that I think is still on the books in New York State. Is that correct, Renee?
It depends on what kind of benefits a project asks for and what kind of mechanism.
But I saw that was the benefit that they did ask for.
Generally, it's a straight lease or leaseback transaction.
Right, and so that's how the IDA actually makes their money, is in the sale and leaseback opportunity that is given. So really,
That's not, it's not that
Is it
we
the
make
fees?
money off of.
no, that's the
lease.
fees that are charged in the
There
transaction.
is an administrative fee that is charged to every project.
I understand that.
All of that money is public.
Oh, it's public money, of
Funds,
course.
our budget is public.
Understood.
So-
But I'm just making the point that Prime is not going to be the ultimate owner of this, that Clayton
No,
County
but
IDA will.
Prime will receive the property title transferred back to them
Right.
upon completion of all of the obligations and terms with the
Right.
IDA.
Right.
Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Joan Jansen, resident of Plattsburgh. One of the things that I thought was kind of interesting in the process is that Councilor Kelly seemed aghast at the fact that Prime might consider cut and run if they are not making a profit. And it seems to me that we have so many things here propping them up
That's not right. I never said that.
That,
I've never said anything like that.
okay.
I'm sorry.
Let her ask her question. I'm sorry, I
Let her
didn't
ask
my
her
own
question.
question.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you could excuse me, one of my opening comments is that we did not intend to have a debate tonight.
Right,
but
well, my
we would like to
question is,
keep
has
questions and
anybody,
answers.
is anybody aware of any plans for what the cost would be and what would happen if this project does go bust?
Oh, well, I can answer that from the IDA perspective as the entity who would conceivably be the actual owner of the property. We have a pilot mortgage agent who would have to execute foreclosure. And then the IDA as a public economic development entity would have to, I guess, address the property as it is fit. The IDA has been doing economic development in Clinton County since 1971.
Thank you.
So I have a question and follow-up to that. So then what happens to the property and to the taxes that are being lost?
Right, because then it would be a
And the
tax
$10
exempt
million.
property under IDA.
Certainly a legitimate concern, certainly is. Any other questions
Foster private investment.
from the audience? We do have a couple of questions, and one is, excuse me, when the current GRI plans are so very different from the original plan that won the grant, isn't this a misappropriation of funds? Well, that's a good question. There is quite a variation. When you read closely, the documentation that was prepared and submitted as part of the application for the final approval of the DRI $10 million funds. There is significant differences between what we saw when the applications were processing and what we have seen. And I'm talking about the DRI applications for the 10 million fund. What we saw then, and we saw it in one of our earlier slides, and what we've seen in Prime Development's application are I would consider them significantly different. And that is a good question. And that question is one that we should keep in mind. Another question here is, will there be an opportunity for city residents to vote on aspects of the DRI on the November ballot? I don't know if there would be anything on the November ballot. I assume you'd be talking about the 2020 ballot. Will there be any individual ballot issues that come up as a result of this? I'm not sure.
Of course, there are two counselors, I believe, that are up for election, so I would encourage people, if that's your ward, to, if that's the DRI and their perspective on it is a concern, vote accordingly. The larger question of how you can get involved, though, there will be an environmental review process. And, it's kind of complicated, but the simple part of the environmental review is there an adverse effect on the community? And I think that there's an overwhelming understanding that quite clearly there is an adverse effect on the community. And if the process is followed right, correctly, and thoroughly, that should be revealed. There's also a series of procedural items that have to be adhered to. So you'll see opportunities going forward, and you'll see opportunities to voice your opinion. Also, as you know, the Plattsburgh Citizens Coalition, there's over 2,000 people that have signed a petition. Nearly everybody in the downtown, nearly every business, nearly every property owner. That doesn't seem to matter at all to anybody in City Hall, but I think it matters to us. And we've raised an unprecedented amount of money. We're well over $15,000 already without barely trying. We're at least halfway to our goal. We've secured legal counsel. We're currently preparing what we think is an excellent legal case with solid standing that is going to drive the Prime Development project out of town. And that will be really good for all of us, because then we'll be able to reset and return this to the downtown revitalization that was initially envisioned and that will benefit people instead of the profits of one entity. So look for opportunities, think about, if you haven't already donated, we're on Facebook, there's a website. All donations, large and small, are appreciated, and, there's ways for you to get involved, so just keep that in mind going forward.
Good point. Thank you for that. That's probably going to just about wrap us up.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, so,
I'm going to ask a question on that. Tim Palkovic asked me today. He texted me, asked me a question. The city on Columbus Day began the process of reconfiguring the Court Street parking lot, and Tim says he's heard a rumor that the farmer's market might be torn down pretty soon. And so the question is, how can the city proceed to begin to reconfigure the downtown before this whole development has been approved by the seeker process?
good question. It sounds like to me a legal question. It could be one of the legal issues that comes up as we continue to work with our attorney and his team to move forward with the legal challenge. Any other questions we can address? Yes, sir.
Young Bell, city resident, when we hear the original plan, what is the original plan we're talking about? Was it the conceptual plan that was submitted for the DRI? When we hear we won it, I always say we earned it. Is that the plan we're talking about? Because something needed to be submitted, because something needed to be submitted. It was conceptual. Is that the original plan that I don't want to say we're hung up on, or are we talking farther in, or are you talking farther into it? And also I would comment, because of the Buffalo billions, I don't know if people are familiar with that, because of the corruption out in Buffalo, the top bidders throughout New York State, let's put them in the A team, who have the quick resources for such a project, they're out of the loop because they don't touch municipal, they don't touch government contracts after that because of indictments or flying arrests, incarcerations, etc. So it kind of went to the B team to put these bids out. And my understanding is that Prime is probably a member more of the B team than they were than the A team. So there was no anticipation of multiple bidders. I think there might have been anticipation more than one. But I'm just wondering, what are we talking the original concept?
Well, there were the concept plans that were prepared were an evolution that goes back to my recollection as early as the 1980s. There were plans that were set forth for Jersey Street, for the arts corridor, and so forth. And those plans evolved over time, and the process that went toward evolving those plans was the public participation process. There were many public meetings held during the DRI application process. There were thousands, tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of dollars spent on consultants to prepare those plans. So I wouldn't characterize the plan that went into the DRI as something that was put there just because something had to be shown. I think it was a carefully thought process. I think that the plans that did go in the strategic plan, the strategic initiative plan, I believe is what it's called in the DRI process. I think there was a lot of thought that was put into those plans. And it had a lot of support, had support from most everyone that I know. The plan that doesn't have support, what kind of took everybody by surprise, is the plan that was prepared by Prime that shows something quite different. And that's when I got involved with this process myself. I thought what the public process as it had evolved to that date was good. I think it was anticipated, and we showed you a slide of that earlier. But it's what we're seeing now, presented by Prime, is something that's different. In my opinion, it was a kick in the gut to those of us that supported the earlier plan.
If I could read one quick sentence. Thank you, Dale, because that's a good question. This is the very first part of the original grant application, and maybe it's a good place to end. The original grant application said this area will be, referring to the Durkee Street parking lot, this area will be transformed into a city center that will become the central gathering place, a recreational access space, a space to expand seasonal farmers market to year-round. That's where we started, and that's what won us, or as you put it, earned us the grant. Since then, as Scott described, it was transformed into the strategic plan, which I flashed a couple up, and you can see how it's been hijacked and derailed since that time. So that's a good question. By the way, as Scott wraps up, if anybody wants to hang around longer, then we'll hang out. Unlike the council, we don't set egg timers, and we'll hang out just as long as you want us.
I have a question. Have you covered the status of the current legal challenge?
Yeah, to give you a broad overview of that, again, the attorney, the Lake George attorney, as he's known, it has been retained by the Plattsburgh Citizens Coalition. He has submitted a letter to the Common Council back in, was that September or late August? When his initial rollout of his legal research that was presented to the Common Council. Response given back to the attorney by the city in that regard. We are continuing to work with the attorney for filing an actual action in the courts. And it's probably going to be expensive, but that's one of our prime objectives as Plattsburgh Citizens Coalition is to raise funds to continue with that legal challenge. Any other questions? Anybody?
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
If anyone has questions about the pilot and you'd like to get the answers from the IDA, I'm happy to provide all of my documentation. It's all things I need to provide to the state, available to the public. I work in the Clinton County Legislative Office, so you can find me there. Industrial Development.